has been announced. The British Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, is going to visit China this week in an attempt to stabilise an increasingly turbulent relationship. He has promised to raise concerns over human rights, rising tensions about Taiwan, and the erosion of democracy in Hong Kong. China is, of course, a major trading partner, but it is increasingly a geopolitical pariah. Indeed, critics say any bending of the knee to President Xi sends the wrong message. Now, one of those critics is former leader of the Conservative Party, Ian Duncan Smith. Ian, thank you for making time to talk about this. Quite simply, a trip by Cleverly to China, not a good idea in your books. Why?
I think it's a waste of time. It's interesting because just quite recently, the German foreign minister came back from a visit to Beijing, and she said, when it comes to anything to do with human rights or social issues, all the terrible things that have happened, genocide, etc., they're just not listening. She said it's like talking to, I think in effect, she said, it's like talking to a brick wall. They're not giving anything back. They just wait till you finish, and they only want to talk about the things that matter to them. And if you're not prepared to talk about those, then your meeting is quite short. I mean, the problem we've got is we are dealing with a country that is enormously powerful now. We've basically fed it in that direction. I say, by the way, I should give it a declaration. I am sanctioned by the Chinese government, and so are my family. So the reality I have here is that this is a government that has committed genocide, is committing genocide in Xinjiang, slave labor regularly. Many of the products we buy are slave labor involved in them. They threaten to invade Taiwan regularly. They've invaded the South China Seas against the UN's edicts. They trash the Sino-British Agreement. They're arresting peaceful democracy campaigners. They trash the Christian churches. They have been doing organ harvesting on the Falun Gong in China. It goes on and on and on. This is a regime that is redolent, I think, of the Nazi regime in the 1930s. And we learned then the hard way that appeasement to organizations like this simply doesn't work. You have to be very clear and obvious to them that there are downsides to behavior like this, which is beyond the pale.
Those are some very, very strong words, ways to frame it in. Of course, your interpreter opinion on that, and it's a huge breadth of expertise on the issue as well. You've listed all of those points there, Taiwan, the Uyghurs, what's happened to Hong Kong as well. I hear all of that. I spent the last 2 years over on the other side of the world in Singapore reporting on the economics of China and Asia as well. My surprise at coming back to this side of the world is that people don't seem to be taking it very seriously, the threat of the emergent China. In fact, it's too late now. It's already emerged. But in terms of it being an economic force, we can't ignore that. It's likely to overtake the US in the next decade as the world's largest economic superpower. Can we afford to not have a relationship with it?
Well, first of all, I don't think it will. Maybe 7 years ago, when people thought it would, that was a possibility. But China's economy is now in a real mess, to be quite frank with you. But the key thing here is you're right. It's interesting that you're in Singapore, but the reality is we're not ignoring them. What we have to do is we need to treat with them on the basis that says we're not prepared to bend our knee to you or to give you an inch when it comes to the brutality that you serve out to those inside China and outside China. And you must abide by global rules that we all agree to, like the World Trading Organization. You will know then at your time at Singapore, China regularly trashes those rules. They subsidize businesses. You know, the telecoms industry was massively subsidized in China, Huawei and others. That's why they've pretty much got rid of most of the free world's telecom communications companies, because there's no money in it for them. This goes on the whole time. So it's not just in human rights, it's elsewhere too. And so I think it's very important. A relationship with China, as America shows, can be done on the basis where you are very clear and you sanction those officials who behave appallingly, which America has done, which we failed to do in this country. We haven't sanctioned a single person, an administrator in Hong Kong, for the trashing of the Sino-British Agreement and the brutality they're meting out now. America's sanctioned 10, and they didn't actually run Hong Kong. And when it comes to Xinjiang, we've sanctioned 3 low officials. America's sanctioned 12, including the most senior. So, you know, other countries manage to have a relationship on the basis of robust, direct criticism, and we shouldn't shy from it, but we are shying from it.
When you lay it out like that, it makes me wonder why we're having this different type of relationship, why the lack of sanctions, if you think they are so warranted and necessary, which I'm inclined to agree with you on a lot of those points. And in terms of that insight you got from the German ambassador that went over and what they found out in terms of the negotiation, is it any point at all going to the meeting? Because what's the UK got to offer China? Why would they listen to us?
Well, we've got a lot to offer them because China's busy with their spies inside the UK. We have a lot of technology here. We also have a lot of involvement and links in security and intelligence with the United States. We are a global player. But the problem is we play ourselves down in these matters. So our universities are inundated now with Chinese postgrad students. They're definitely completely in hock in terms of money to them. We have the Confucius Institute now checking up on Chinese overseas students, scaring them out of debates and meetings. They shut down debates inside some of the universities when they're critical of China. This goes on here in the UK right now. We have false police stations, Chinese police stations. We had people being hauled into the compound in Manchester of the consulate general and beaten up in front of the police. All this stuff tells you that this is a regime that is very like the regime in the 1930s. What we have to do is be honest and clear and straight with them about what is not acceptable and public, and say, until you change your ways, we simply cannot cooperate you on the basis that you may wish to.